and welcome to a new CD and vinyl, or if you prefer, vinyl and CD review column. But before we get to the reviews, just a quickie. Firstly, as ever, if you would be ever so kind enough to click on the like and also subscribe buttons, helps the channel no end. And one final thing, a quick t-shirt competition. Points only, no real prizes, but just to test your knowledge. First one back in the comments with the correct answers wins. And this is the t-shirt in question. Question 1, which TV series does this t-shirt reference? Question 2, what does shadow actually mean? Because it is an acronym, as you can tell by the full stops in between the letters. Question 3, who was the commander in charge of the base? The character name. Question 4, who was the real-life actor who also was one of the stars of the police drama Special Branch? And question 5, which actress in this TV series went on to front a very famous, rather cultish British music TV programme? A lady. She was the compere, the host, the presenter of this rather cultish now, music TV programme. It featured popular groups of the time. And first up on vinyl we have Caligulas Horse, a sort of prog metal band, and their new album on the Inside Out label called Rise Radiant. Album number 5 then, pressed on black vinyl with a reasonable master from these Aussie, well, Brisbane to be exact, prog metal chaps. A double album with a free CD thrown into the package for good measure. This new album actually features a couple of slightly surprising bonus track covers. The first is Peter Gabriel's Don't Give Up. The second is Split Enz' Message to My Girl. The band themselves have been around since 2011 and feature vocalist Jim Gray, Sam Vellen on lead guitar with Adrian Golby on rhythm. Bass belongs to Dave Cooper, while the sticks are held by Josh Griffin. So, Dream Theater perhaps, Circus Maximus maybe, even elements of Porcupine Tree. Sure, if you like the sounds of those groups, then there's plenty that will be familiar here. Technically, there's nothing to fault from this group. The band handle their instruments with panache, the songs are solid, the performances are full of energy and drive. The group, as a group, is tight and slick. They flow easily and effortlessly. And yet, I fail to be excited. I leant more towards exited rather than excited. A bit Me Too, lacking a spark of originality, verging on the nondescript, slightly mundane. I wondered why I should be listening to this group and not one of the other bands I've just mentioned, and I couldn't think of a reason. Put it this way, having heard this efficient, well played, professionally put together album, if you then told me that this band was about to retire entirely from the business and never play or issue any music ever again, not one of my facial muscles would move, twitch or respond in any way. Not one. Janet Devlin, called Confessional, it's on the Insomnia label. Or Red Dev, as I like to call her. Well, I would if I'd ever met her. Before you focus on the lady with the red hair, take a look at the very nice lyric book packed inside the front gatefold sleeve. This is a lovely production, large format, high gloss, featuring handwritten lyrics on the right side and a high production photograph of our redhead on the left to add flavour, mood and atmosphere as that track is played. It's a nice touch and adds to the value of the album as a whole. With our red, pressed on black, Northern Irish warbler Devlin first hit the scene after appearing on the 2011 season of X Factor. Now, this one fact should really be enough to turn my thoughts against Devlin, and I expect that she has a Harry Potter-like scar under that red hair as a proof of her encounter. Red Dev released her debut album in 2014 and, surprisingly, unlike most other X Factor stars, she's still here. For that, she deserves praise indeed. Devlin mixes folk and pop, and her Irish lilt infuses her presentation, giving a Celtic twist to her lyrical delivery. As a singer, she sounds good. Not great, but good. Her passion is obvious, as is her talent as a singer and performer. Yes, she has that slightly irritatingly earnest delivery that's the fashion of the times, but there's also some fire here. I didn't do cartwheels upon listening to this vinyl album. Tears refused to run down my cheeks, and I never felt moved to even tap my foot. Nevertheless, Red Dev has something. I'm just not sure what. If only she'd turn her back on that pop and go slightly more hardcore. Hardcore what? Well, I ain't too sure about that either, because really there's not enough to go on. That said, I'd like to see more authenticity from Red Dev and less cowl-infused hooks. This one's called Halton, from Halton, on the label called Halton. A double vinyl album, nicely mastered on black vinyl from the Icelandic outfit that's been out of the spotlight for all of 7 years. This release, their fourth, kicks the butt of those who still feel that anyone who emerges from Iceland should sound like Björk or Sigur Rós. Instead, the band combine a grand, spacious synth wash arrangement with positively poppy vocal presentations, full of gloss and the sort of earnest, intense schlock that will have the phone ringing off the hook. Hollywood-based original movie soundtracks surely beckon here. The group have a future in the flicks, I'm sure. Vocals are full of emotional gravity, and drama seeps from each seam. If I'm honest, and hey, that's why I'm on stage here, I would have preferred an instrumental version of this album, which has a neoclassical electronica presentation of imagination, power and sweep. And I could have done without the overly wordy woe, the distress, the melancholy, the heartache and the suffering. One point of order I'd like to bring to the committee: it's been quite a while since I've seen a credit list quite this long and quite so exotic. Well, exotic to my meagre small-town mind of limited intelligence at any rate. Never before have I seen a credit list populated by so many Sigridors, 4 Annas, and an Anne, 4 Jeans with an accent, and even 2 Ragnhildors, plus a Gunlager. Reading the inner sleeves was an education, let me tell you. I feel enriched by the experience and will pass on the saga of the liner notes down my ancestral line in true Norse tradition. Dance with Willie Henderson, the master, from Willie Henderson from Demon Records. Henderson was a talented guy who began his musical life standing behind Otis Rush playing sax, learned from the arranger James Mack, then worked with Carl Davis at Brunswick, plunging into a range of production and arrangement jobs while playing on his share of records by outfits like the Chi-Lites, Barbara Acklin and Jackie Wilson. Nevertheless, there is a sense of novelty about this group of tracks that push a suite of dance styles and saccharine pop upon the listener. Everything from the Break Your Back to a cover of Sugar Sugar diminish the impact of this 1974 production, which does feature a few playful highlights, such as the soulful funk outing Ooh Wee Baby I Love You, and Off Into a Black Thing, and even Funky Chicken Part 2. It's almost as if Henderson swept the floor of ditties in the studio, scooped them all up in a shovel, opened a nearby vinyl LP sleeve, carefully poured them in, and then handed that to his record label. This is a real mishmash, curate's egg of an album. And, God help me, I still like it. Aretha Franklin now, with Aretha from Music on Vinyl. It's when I see albums entitled by the first name of an artist that I wonder if the ego has landed, or indeed if the artist is just so darn popular that a first name is all that's now required. Or finally, everyone was just so busy arranging lunch that no one could think of a title. If you didn't know that this vinyl LP had been originally released in 1986, one look at that Andy Warhol designed sleeve art would give the game away. There's a few R&B hits on this release, including Jumpin' Jack Flash. That song was produced by Keith Richards, and would you believe it also featured in a contemporary film starring Whoopi Goldberg. You see, 80s all over. Other tracks including Jimmy Lee, I Knew You Were Waiting For Me, which includes a star turn with George Michael, no less. And there's Rock a Lot with If You Need My Love Tonight, featuring the vocal addition of former Sly and the Family Stone bassist Larry Graham. Again, 80s screams forth. Add the involvement of the likes of Kenny G, David Sanchez and Ronnie Wood, and you begin to wonder if the Lady Franklin saw this as an excuse to let her hair down and have a party. A considered, thoughtful, well-implemented album, this is not. Pressed on coloured vinyl, it is fun though, it's a laugh, and it's a celebration of Aretha Franklin being Aretha Franklin, and everyone in the world wanting to celebrate that fact. It's a rock star equivalent of a selfie with Aretha, basically. 2 albums from the Spanish audiophile outfit Wawa, both from the band Farmyard. The first one is Farmyard, and this album is actually contained, well, in a sleeve, but underneath the sleeve, it's contained in a plastic bag. You can see the handles. The second one from Farmyard is called Back to Fronting. This is a pair of reissued LPs from this New Zealand combo, Wellington to be specific, that spanned the career of this short-lived group. Issued in 1970 and 1971 respectively, the vinyl editions of Farmyard and Back to Fronting were originally released on the Polydor label. If you know the bands Relics and Tom Thumb, then you'll know the band member Rick White, who played guitar and vocals here. Tom Swainson, described in the liner notes as being very hairy, was on drums. He would later join the bands Orchestra and Red Eye. Milton Parker handled lead guitar, Andy Stevens was on sax, and Paul Curtis on bass. The self-titled vinyl album has been imaginatively packaged, as I say, in a printed plastic bag, the type you might be proffered at a record shop. A die-cut white card sleeve is inside, printed with the credit and track information, with a white inner inserted within, alongside a glossy insert showing the band in action on one side, and a stylized piece of cow art, of course, on the flip. A quirky yet fun package. Back to Fronting resides in a more traditional gatefold, but it has been adorned in a similarly whimsical manner. And the sounds from this outfit? Hard rock. In fact, if you like classic hard rock from the early 70s, then both of these albums offer perfect fodder. They are both typical of the times and thus, for a rock fan, complete hidden gems that need grabbing as soon as. There's serious rock grooves here, folks. Distortion, keening vocals, side dishes of guitar noodling, and bluesy arrangements that will delight any fan of the genre. That said, there is the odd countrified ditty amongst the collection, with psychedelic overtones as 60s leftovers. It's a varied yet still powerful collection, and oh, the track Looking for a Place on the album Back to Fronting, a complete and utter classic. On CD now, and from the Jasmine label, we have the singles collection from Dave Brubeck. The singles ranging from 1956 to 1962. His quartet was formed after an accident forced Brubeck to change his playing style. Nerve pain prevented him from returning to his usual playing form. Once up and running though, his quartet lineup changed along with his record labels. He would move from Fantasy, or Vogue in the UK, to Columbia, or Fontana in the UK, but contractual obligations meant that 3 more albums had to be released on Fantasy, even after he jumped ship, while the label itself held their own unreleased archives that would enable the company to issue more Brubeck specials. From the walk-in date here, 1956, saw a tweaking of the lineup from Bob Bates to Eugene Wright, and from Joe Dodge to Joe Morello. This collection brings the first 2 singles to be issued on Vogue in 1956, at a perfume counter and Mamselle, plus their attendant B-sides. It's interesting to see the single version of the classic hit single Take 5 make an appearance, different as it was from the LP version, while its B-side, Blue Rondo a la Turk, was also a different edit to the LP version. This wouldn't be the last time such shenanigans occurred, and many of those are included here. It's great to see these unique variants collected on CD, while the edited versions of his longer form music serves as a good introduction to the man if you haven't bought his work in the past. You'll even find a couple of vocal collaborations with Carmen McRae. Nicely mastered, this is a cracking collection of 26 tracks and is ideal for the jazz beginner or hardcore fan. I have a promo, hence the sleeve here. This is from the Gist and Interior Windows on Tiny Global. This is an intriguing release from Mr. Stuart Moxham, he of Young Marble Giants, the minimal primitivist UK indie outfit from the early 80s. When he and Alison Stratton, the former vocalist, split YMG, Moxham was at a bit of a loss where to take his music. He formed The Gist, but ran in multiple directions at once, and really wasn't thanked by the public for his efforts. So the group ground to a halt. The public, as it were, didn't get the gist. Nevertheless, Moxham's work has received more recent attention, and a reappraisal has meant that Moxham's Gist is okay now. So, hey, thank goodness for a happy ending, hey. A collection of unreleased tracks was issued in 2017, but this album adds 13 new performances or alternative versions from the band's catalogue. That includes both sides of the band's 7-inch single plus their contribution to the Enemy's C81 cover tape. Fans of YMG will grab this collection with no small measure of gusto, and I would encourage that energy because there's much to admire here, with a relatively low-key and simplified production forging a direct suite of ditties that get to the point and then get out. There's plenty of musicality here too, I hasten to add, with its fair share of hooks to boot, so the appeal should be pretty broad. If obscure indie from the classic period, when indie really was indie, then check out this collection now. And that's me done, folks. Thank you very much for staying to the end, and the next video, if you can join me, and I hope you can, is on Friday, and I reckon we're going to be looking at a CD player, which is a bit of a change, from Luxman. Should be an interesting one. Hopefully you can join me then, and until then, bye bye for now.